But I've also presupposed in that conversation, me includes my wife and maybe my kids or whatever. Okay, and I'll give you another example. So, let's say someone uttered in Second World War.
Yeah.
No one knows the plans of the Germans except the Germans. Okay. Now that is true in a way. Maybe Britain didn't know and the Allied forces didn't know the plans. But also, I haven't included God. You wouldn't go and say to me, when you said no one knows the plans of the Germans but the Germans, you wouldn't go and say, aha, but does that mean God didn't know it? No, you would say no. You've assumed it in that quantifier that also God knows it. But you didn't need to utter it because it's already known that God knows it. So I don't need to say no one knows the plans of the Germans but the Germans and God. And maybe the angels.
Okay.
And I'll give you the example. I'll now apply it to this scenario. So when Jesus says, "No one knows the hour, but God, not even the angels in heaven, not even whatever, but God."
Not the Son.
Not the Son, but God the Father.
Yeah. So it's an explicit statement, not the Son.
Yes. So
when he said not the Son, he implies himself.
1 second. Yes.
Yeah.
So what now applying this idea of a restrictive quantifier is simply saying that. Okay, this deals with the issue of the Holy Spirit. Now, I'll firstly start with Jesus.
Okay.
When the Son word is used, what is that normally used in those contexts? When Jesus uses the term Son?
Oh, you mean the
generally,
like during his ministry?
Yeah.
Is that what he's saying?
But he's not talking about the divine Son, is he? No, we all know he's talking about the human messianic figure. So what someone reads that just says is he's negating it within his human natural role as the Son. The Son, as a human, does not know this. Okay? Because that term Son, when it's normally used, is talking to a human figure. So he's saying this human figure does not know it.
Why did you assume only the human figure?
One second. But because you have this idea of a restrictive quantifier, you're saying then, Jesus doesn't need to say that the Holy Spirit knows the hour, or the Son in his divine nature knows the hour, because them being God is already assumed in the conversation. So by him saying no one knows the hour but the Father, because the Son in the divine nature has identical knowledge to the Father, and because one second.
That's an assumption.
One second. Okay. Because the Son in the divine nature, if he is God, you will agree with me, he has the same knowledge as the Father. If he is God, he has the same knowledge. The Holy Spirit, if he is God, he has the same knowledge as the Father. So when I say that the Father, no one knows the hour but the Father, I don't need to go on to say, and the Holy Spirit, and the Son, the Son in his divine nature, because it's redundant. Because already, by me saying the Father knows it, it's assumed that...
So why didn't Jesus just say that God knows?
No, because, I'm saying...
It could have been much easier, isn't it? But he specifically says only the Father knows.
Yes.
So when he says only the Father knows, it excludes the Son and Holy Spirit automatically.
No, not necessarily, no. Because I'm saying...
The reason you're reading it this way is because obviously you want to establish the Trinity understanding and to make some coherent sense of that. But you see, Jesus could have easily said, like he said many things, that with regards to God, he could have easily said that only God knows. When he says at the very beginning, no one knows, so that excludes everyone.
That's a quantifier, restrictive quantifier. Yes.
That excludes everyone.
Yes.
Then he excludes specifically the angels, the Son,
himself.
Yes, and he says at the end, only the Father knows.
Yes.
If he had said only God knows, then your argument would be accurate. No. You know the example you gave about the Ferrari? Yes? When you say that you own it and by default your wife also owns it, yes? But the thing is, when you own it, when you go and perhaps buy the Ferrari, yes, you can put both your names there as the owners, or you could buy just on your name. And both are possible. I'm not saying not. Yes? So in the first case, where only you put your name, you would be the legal owner of that. Yes? So whenever you have an accident or an insurance claim, you are the one liable, not your wife. You see what I mean? So it's not always by default that your wife is going to own it. It depends how you signed the contract when you bought it. What is the other example you gave?
What was that example? Is it? The Germans, sorry. The Germans.
Yeah, again the Germans. We know very well when we talk about countries, yes? We talk about, especially when you talk about making laws or something, it is only the authorities involved, yes? For example, Britain went to war, yes, as a coalition with the American forces to Iraq.
Yes.
Obviously, there were millions of people here who did not want that war.
Yes.
they are not part of it. They used to say, "Not in my name." Remember those placards?
Yes.
There were like I think a million people
Yep,
here
yep, yep.
who were all marching and protesting against that.
Yep.
But this is, you see, this is linguistic. We don't have to understand what it means when he says Britain went to war or Germany went to war. What is the third example he gave?
No, so I think with that example though, I didn't say Britain. Remember, I said no one knows the plans of the Germans except the Germans. So
Yeah,
I've made it.
But the thing is, again, when you talk about the plans, if you're talking about plans specifically with regards to, say, for example, something to do with trade secrets, or with foreign policies or something, you see, there is always a particular department who is in charge of that. Yes. When you say the Germans, yes, like for example, nowadays in the news you hear the Russians poisoned someone, yes, some spy or something. They obviously have some espionage going on, some, I don't know, internal feuds going on, whom they target. And there's a department. Not everyone within the Russian authorities know this. But you see, when we actually look at it, when we analyze it, we know there is always someone where the buck stops.
Yeah, but remember what
and where does the buck stop in the Trinity? Like you said, the highest authority is the Father.
But did you see the example I brought with that German one? I said no one knows the plans of the Germans except the German. And I said, in that sentence, that restrictive quantifier, I don't need to also state and God and the angels.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So because it's redundant, because it's already.
But that applies to everything.
No. Yeah, so I'm saying.
To everything.
No, so I'm saying when you utter something like a restrictive quantifier, you don't need to state everything that's part of that quantifier. So even though I say and no one knows the plans of the Germans.
You know, I agree with you there. But there is a difference. Here we are talking about God.
Yes.
So you cannot use that example as a quantifier when we are talking specifically about God.
No,
so if Jesus, yes, who is representing God, he is telling you clearly only the Father knows, and then should I believe him or should I believe you, who's assuming the Father knows and the Son knows and the Holy Spirit knows?
What you didn't.
We're talking about God, my friend. We don't need to bring the Germans.
No, because
or whatever it is.
Will make it clearer.
Yeah, it's not really, is it, when you talk about God?
No, but do you want me to tell you why?
Yeah.
Because the whole point of saying that was saying there are some other utterances which will be redundant. So there's no need for me to say it because it's already assumed. So when I say no one knows the plans of the Germans but the Germans, it's already assumed that God also knows it as well. So I don't need to then start listing out all of these things because it's redundant. It's a waste of time saying it. So when I agree with you.
So when I'm not saying no.
So going back to Jesus, when it says no one knows the hour of the Son's coming, not even the angels, not even the Son, only but the Father, it doesn't also need to go and say, and the Son in his divine nature, and the Holy Spirit in his divine, and the Holy Spirit.
If you're talking about God,
no, do you know?
Yes.
1 second. Because it will be redundant.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes, because when you already say the Father knows, because the Son and the Holy Spirit are also omniscient, they don't. I don't need to.
Where is the evidence for that?
1 second.
Where's the evidence they are omniscient?
One second. So I don't need to also state it. It's already redundant. When I already say the Father knows the hour, it's already assumed that if the Holy Spirit is God and if the Son is also God in his divine nature, they also know the hour. So it's redundant for me to start listing out but the Father and the Holy Spirit because also saying and the Holy Spirit and the Son doesn't add to anything. By already saying no, it doesn't, because by already saying the Father,
it does. If Jesus had said only God knows, then it would. Yes. But when he specifically said only the Father knows, I'm sure he knew what he was talking about.
Do you get what I'm saying? Because when you already say and the Father, it's already assumed that the Holy Spirit has the same knowledge as the Father. So you don't also need to go and say and the Holy Spirit because it doesn't add to it. You already assume if it's the Holy Spirit and that's the Spirit of God, then he also has the same knowledge as the Father.
No,
so you don't need to also.
That's an assumption. Like I said, it's an assumption from a Trinitarian perspective where you would say, yes, they would all know. But the thing is, unless, look, I have a specific verse from Mark 13:32 where Jesus says, only the Father knows. Unless you show me a specific verse where he says, the Son knew and the Holy Spirit knew.
I don't need to do that. I can just say off of your verse, all that the Son has, all that Jesus has done has restricted this, the angels and the Son and no one else in reference to those. So the angels and the Son. Now then I said to you, what does the Son term normally refer to in Mark? Well, the Son, I mean, most people, especially Muslims, will say the Son is definitely referring to him as a human, as a messianic figure. They'll never go and say when Jesus says the Son, he's talking to himself as a divine being. No, when he says the Son, it's always talking about this messianic figure, a human.
Okay.
So all Jesus is saying, restricting this, the Son as a human does not know. The angels do not know. And no one else like them know, but the Father. Now, saying but the Father, it's assumed that anyone who is co-equal to the Father, has omniscience like the Father, will also know that. So I don't need to also go and state Holy Spirit and Son in the divine nature.
Okay, let me rephrase that question.
Yes.
Does the second person of the Trinity know the hour?
Yes.
So now, you're saying the second person of the
Yes.
Trinity knows the hour.
No problem.
Okay. You know, that is only one person?
Yes.
Yes? When you say in his human nature he didn't know,
Yes.
yes? You know, normally the nature is
Yes.
associated with the person. The nature is not something that is floating in the sky by itself. The nature is always associated to a person.
Attributes that make up a person.
Yeah,
Yes.
so what I'm saying is that this nature, human nature, and divine nature remain in this one person all the time. So when I asked you, does this person know? Then you're saying his human nature didn't know. Isn't that right? But the thing is, you don't realize that the human nature is actually attached to one person.
Yes.
You cannot say, you know, for example, if somebody dies, yes, say somebody dies in somebody's family, that person might be a good-natured person, might be a kind person, might be a rich person, yes? Sorry, no, rich is a bad example. So his nature, his characteristics, these things are something that were with him all his life. But when the person dies, people normally say the person died. They do not say his good nature died or his bad nature died. You see what I mean? So when we are talking about a person, then you cannot disassociate the characteristics. Yeah, the characteristics or the attributes, the characteristics or the attributes of that person. So the human nature is attached to what? The second person of the Trinity. The divine nature, again, is attached to the second person of the Trinity. Both these natures are attached to one person.
Yes.
So did that person know the hour?
Yes. Yes. So I'm saying.
So how do you say that
Yes,
his human nature didn't know?
So can I say?
I don't
so-
understand
yeah,
that.
so-
You're somehow
Yeah.
separating,
No. Can I?
like the Nestorians used to do, you're somehow
Oh, no,
separating it
No.
into another person.
No,
So either the person knows
No.
or the person doesn't know.
no,
You can't have it both ways.
No. For me to do that, I would have to go and say there are two persons who possess two individual, distinct, separate natures.
Yeah, which would be a heresy.
Nestorianism, yes. So I'll never try to do that.
Good.
So I would say within a Chalcedonian viewpoint, one person possessing two natures,
Yeah.
it's open to say that attached to those natures there was specific belief systems. So whilst he was on earth, Jesus had a specific human belief system that was associated with the human nature. And so whilst he was on earth, he was operating within that belief system, okay, and he possessed certain beliefs and knowledge within that belief system. And with his divine nature, which are made up of attributes, he also had a divine belief system, which included omniscience, which included knowledge of the hour. So within that divine belief system which he had, he didn't operate within, he could have, but he didn't. He was operating within his human belief system, he did not hold that knowledge. So where there will be a contradiction, because just schematically mapping out, sorry if this is a little bit philosophical, but I'll make it very succinct. So where there will be a contradiction would be if I said P and not P in A. Okay, so I'm saying A possesses, a person, possesses P and does not possess P. That would be contradictory, won't you say? So saying that this person possesses P, knowledge, and does not possess P, knowledge, is contradictory.
Yeah.
That would be strange. And that would be an issue though, and that's where monophysitism goes wrong. But where diophysitism does not have this issue is because it says P in T in A, and not P in Q in A. So it says A, the person, possesses P in T, which is his divine nature, and not P in Q, Q, his human nature, and so they're not contradictory because within that human nature, which had a belief system, I had P. And within this other belief system, the divine belief system, I had not P. And because they're in different systems, they don't contradict each other. If there was only one system which had P and not P, they'll be contradictory. And you'll have to say Christians are not making sense. And that's why monophysitism is a problem, because it's saying there is one nature that has all these contradictory attributes. But because we say there are two natures which are distinct and which have their own belief systems, there are not things which are contradictory. So we can have this knowledge of the hour.
So how many consciousness are there within the second person of the Trinity?
Where you have that issue though is that does a belief system mean a consciousness?
Well, it requires consciousness.
Well, no, does it? So I'm saying.
Are you saying can you have a belief system without consciousness?
No, so you can have. Remember, we're talking about possibility here. You can have a belief system. You can have a dual belief system, two belief systems, with contradictory beliefs within them, within the same person, within one consciousness.
Really?
And where you get these examples are with psychological
Unless
disorders.
you're schizophrenic,
Exactly.
I doubt that will happen.
Exactly. So you have psychological disorders. Okay.
We are not talking.
No. Remember.
Let's not talk about human beings. Let's talk about stick to the second person of the Trinity.
Remember, Hashim.
But
I'm going to have to go in a few minutes. Remember what the debate is, and really a thing I'm trying to make sense.
Yeah.
My main point I want to be at Speaker's Corner is making this distinction.
No, absolutely. And that's the reason I came to you rather than going to people who shout over you and do not answer the question and have this huge egos and basically. So I came to you for this. So when you talk about, for example, Jesus having two belief systems, but it's still the same person, right?
Yes.
So this one person has two belief systems, and this one person has one consciousness.
Yes.
Then these two belief systems, are they contradictory?
They have contradictory information within them. Yes. So they have contradictory beliefs within the system.
It's the same person, remember?
Yes.
How is that not? How is that not an issue?
So I'll give you an example.
That's a huge problem.
A psychological disorder people can go through, especially through when they are mourning. Okay, they can go through, maybe I've said this before to you, but you can go through this psychological disorder where you have a divided mind. Even though you have one consciousness, one stream of consciousness, you can have two separate beliefs within two systems. So basically your mind divides. So psychologically you can go through it temporarily when you go through a period of mourning. So someone who loses, let's say, a son can hold one belief where they still believe that their son is alive. They still believe it.
I can understand.
And they are acting within that belief.
I can understand these psychological issues.
Can I just say that last point?
You're going? All right, take it.
So
as a human, yes, they do have illnesses. They do have psychological issues. Yes, I'm not saying no.
Yes.
As humans, yes, they can have several psychological issues. And they can have this schizophrenia or maybe, what's it called, split personality.
Yes.
And these are, of course, issues and psychological problems. But how do you reconcile two natures, one person, one consciousness, but yet two belief systems?
Okay, so, and without a psychological disorder.
Without contradiction.
So,
or any illnesses.
But remember, and I'm just trying to always draw this back, that what we are saying would reconcile that term again. We are talking about possibility. So I don't have to give you a model or an explanation which seems plausible, because why it's not plausible is because this only happens with psychological disorders. And obviously, it doesn't seem like Jesus had a psychological disorder.
I hope not.
But to show something to be possible, I just have to say there is an example of this within reality. Now, this sort of thing can happen. And it can happen when someone goes through a psychological disorder.
That's comparing apples and oranges.
No, so 1 second.
You're using mortals and trying to compare the immortals.
No, can I tell you how it's not? Because I have to say to you that there is this logically possible state of affairs that God can bring about. Normally, this happens only under psychological distress.
Exactly. Illness. It's an illness.
If God decides to become incarnate, he can become incarnate without taking on the psychological disorder, siphoning off the psychological disorder and how this divided mind came about. He can do it without that having come about. And you have to say to me, God can do that. God is omnipotent. He can do this.
When you basically, I know where you're trying to get here.
So all I'm saying is, I have to show to you how this can be reconciled logically in a logical.
It doesn't. That's why I'm telling you.
No.
You know why it doesn't? I understand in a psychological case.
Yes.
Of a patient, you might have this split personalities and so on.
Yes.
How many persons are there?
How many persons are there within that person?
Yeah.
No, so
even in a split person, if you were a psychologist treating that person, you would still consider him to be one person, right?
Yes.
Even though his mind is all probably wired in a very different way and he sees things differently, you would still consider him one
yeah, but
person.
he has-
So if I asked you a question,
He's one person, isn't he?
yeah,
But he
if
has-
I asked you a question, who has a psychological problem from the list of your patients with split personality, you would point to that person.
Yes.
He might have a name, John Smith.
Yes.
Yes? And this is what you're going to point to me.
Have
The
you
same,
read-
the
yeah.